Joining me right now is Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. She sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congresswoman, thanks for being here. So let's start with the new comments just in from the president. It now appears the president does care about the oil getting through the strait, though he has said otherwise, and that he does care about getting the strait reopened, though he does say it is not has said it is not his or America's problem. If this is now an objective of the U.S. operation against Iran, what do you think?
Well, it's more of the same with this president. He's incoherent. He's inconsistent. He contradicts himself one day to the next. And that kind of enthusiastic all caps, we just have to get it flowing again. It'll be a gusher. It is madness. It's absolute madness for the head of our military, who has assembled probably as many as 50,000 military folks in the theater there. The president understands that the economic numbers are a disaster. He was supposed to be hired to keep us safe, keep us at peace, and to grow the economy. Instead, what he's done is grow inflation, reduce jobs, increase the price of gas. Right here in Montgomery County yesterday, filling up $4.19 a gallon. The president recognizes he stumbled into something absolutely horrific globally in terms of the Straits of Hormuz, and now creating his own reality. I guess he thinks it's just open because the water is flowing.
Congresswoman, I'm just looking at this tweet, social media post a little bit further. When the president says, take the oil and make a fortune, I mean, he says it as a we. I'm not going to try to read in too far into this, but when he says we can open the strait, take the oil, and make a fortune, as sitting on the Foreign Affairs Committee, has it been suggested to you at all, or in conversation at all, that the United States would then control or own the oil passing through the Strait of Hormuz after this war?
I sit on Foreign Affairs and Appropriations, and wearing both hats, that is, again, incoherent. I'm trying to figure out the legal path where he can just take the oil. And how does he get title to it? How does he then sell it? In the meantime, guess what he's done? He's lifted sanctions on both Iran and Russia. They're now profiting from this war of his own making. It's absolutely absurd. But that's what he also did and spoke about in Venezuela. Remember, it was all about the fentanyl. It was all about the fentanyl until it wasn't about the fentanyl. It was about the oil and him trying to claim it for himself, not for America, not for our revenues. As I said, you got to get title to this stuff, but for himself. He's making no sense. And when he spoke 2 nights ago, he was making no sense. I cannot understand how those around him don't say, Mr. President, what you're talking about is utter madness, not to mention when he talked about bombing Iran back to the Stone Ages, that kind of language around war, it actually doesn't live up to the rules of war. And again, a war of his own choosing that makes no sense.
Pam Bondi is now fired as Attorney General of the United States. Word is that the president is considering, though not having made a decision yet, bringing Lee Zeldin over to be the new AG, bring him over from EPA. Do you think that he is better than Pam Bondi?
I can't make a judgment on that. I think it's just one more loyalist. But what I do want to make clear to your viewing public is, I think, and you saw from Harry's numbers there, she was well underwater in terms of people having any confidence in what she was doing as the head of the Department of Justice. But that's not why she got canned by this president. Not for her unprofessionalism, not for her lack of understanding the independence of the Department of Justice, the importance of the rule of law, the importance of moving forward with transparency on Epstein for the victims. Don't tire of it, anybody who gets the head of DOJ. She was fired because she didn't do enough that the president liked in terms of retribution against his perceived enemies and to cover up the Epstein files. The American public needs to understand this. She was terrible at her job. That's not why she got fired.
There's new CNN polling showing that Americans, the portion of Americans, a growing portion of Americans view both Democratic and Republican parties very negatively, and it remains deeply negative, those who are considered those double haters that we talk about in polling. Democrats, with those double haters early here moving into the midterm season, Democrats hold an advantage. But right now it's driven more by opposition to the GOP than enthusiasm for Democrats. And in this CNN polling, the top reason that people say they don't like the Democratic Party is voters saying that the Democratic Party is ineffective and doesn't do anything. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
I've heard that criticism, Kate. It doesn't entirely surprise me. But I would actually point to what we have been able to do. Take a look at the silliness of the Speaker of the House last Friday, refusing to move forward with the Senate in the middle of the night past a compromise deal that passed unanimously, by the way, out of the Senate. The Speaker, outraged last Friday, keeping us there until 10:30 at night because he was worried about his own speakership. Let's face facts. But now even the president has tired of all of this. John Thune is trying to figure out a new reality, a new path forward. So remember, Republicans have the White House, the Senate, and the House. They're failing to govern. I understand the complaints about Democrats, but we're actually holding a line against this absolutely corrupt, incoherent madness coming out of the administration and his courtiers.
Congresswoman, thank you for your time.